You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu. It's February 5th, 2022, and today we are revisiting a series that I did at the beginning of this season where we go through each and every single division in the NFL, all 8 of them, and we rank each and every team in that division 4 through 1, talking worst first up into the best team of the division. This is going to be an interesting series. The last time I did this, I got a good response on a few videos, whether it was people agreeing or disagreeing with me. I'm not just ranking these teams based off of their overall record from this year. I'm also taking into consideration where they are going into this offseason and things that they're going to have to deal with. So this is kind of where they stand at the end of the year, going into the offseason, my preseason kind of overall standings before all the roster moves and everything goes down. So make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and of course, comment down below as I'm going through the video. Let me know what you agree and disagree with, and we'll have a nice little discussion about that as well. So let's get into it. The very first team coming in at number 4 for the NFC East division, who we are covering today, is going to be the 4-13 New York Giants. There's a lot of turnover going on here. There has been a lot of, I say, if you're a fan of the Giants, a lot of stress, a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment with this team. I had some very high hopes for them coming into this year, and I thought the Giants were going to be, honestly, like you could take their record and flip it the other way. I thought that their ceiling was probably somewhere around that 13 wins mark. But ultimately, that is not what happened. We have a 4-13 team that was struggling through another year, dealing with injuries and just inability to get the job done on the offensive side of the ball. New head coach coming in with Brian Daboll, new GM as well with Joe Schoen. I think everyone that's a Giants fan is probably, head over heels excited to see some change here on a team that has been kind of stuck in what feels like neutral and maybe even rolling backwards down the hill for the last couple of seasons, ready to see the team move on from prior regime at the head coach and the GM spot. I have a lot of question marks for them, and this is basically why I have them sitting at number 4, and also concerns. They're committing to Daniel Jones so early, and it's weird to see something like that considering it's a new GM and a new head coach, and at this point in Daniel Jones' career, we have not really seen from him what you would want to see from a guy to believe that he is the QB1 of this team and the definitive QB1 at that. Also, coupled with the fact that, like I said, there's a new group of guys in there leading the team. There's no ties to him. There's no true need to be committed to them, because if Daniel Jones fails this year, if they do really go with him, it's not really on them. They can just be like, yeah, wash our hands with this. We tried, but we need to get our own guy. So I don't know. I think it depends on how free agency goes and how the draft looks when they're picking in the draft, based off the quarterback situation and just how the quarterbacks look in their pro days and everything this year. But I'm confused as to how the whole Daniel Jones commitment came about. I don't think he's the guy there, and it's not to slight Daniel Jones. It's just that I don't know. I have not seen enough from him, and I have a hard time just blaming everyone else around Daniel Jones for the struggles that he's had. Maybe he is the guy and he just hasn't had a real team around him to really be as good as he is. But at this point in his career, I just feel like he hasn't really elevated anyone around him. He's had some really goofy mishaps too, and I just have a hard time buying him as QB1. So I'm sorry, Giants fans, if there's any of you out there still rooting for DJ to be the guy. That's just kind of where I stand on him. As for another concerning kind of question I have, does the team decide to move on from Saquon Barkley? Barkley was a guy who stormed into the NFL, had a monster rookie year, and then a pretty solid sophomore campaign, but then the injuries started to kind of mount, and he has just not been the same guy, in my opinion. I don't know if it's time to move on from him or not, what the Giants still see in him at this point in this stage of his career, because they're at that point where he's coming up on the end of his rookie deal. There might be some trade value in him. Again, he was so good as a rookie, and maybe there's a team that, would see the opportunity to trade for him and give like a 4th or a 5th round pick, because I don't really see them getting a ton for Saquon at this point. Maybe they think, okay, we trade a 4th or 5th rounder. Saquon could arguably be an upgrade over some of the running backs in the NFL on other teams, and maybe he does, a new fire sparks for him, and he goes back to his old ways, but I find that more unlikely than actually likely. I'm curious to see what they do about Saquon Barkley, because this is kind of a decision offseason for him. But, that is something to keep an eye on, and something I'll definitely be watching is do they move on from him? Do they try to move him around? Are the rumors going to pop out that they try to trade him? We'll definitely have to see, but that's something I'll be certainly keeping an eye on. Another thing that I think needs to be addressed during this offseason, whether that's just internally with them or however they try to sort this whole thing out, Kenny Goliday is about to be on the cap hit for $21.5 million this year. He had only 37 catches, 521 yards, and no touchdown catches this year. Goliday was awesome when healthy in Detroit with Matthew Stafford. To be paid the amount of money he's being paid right now and to not really show up at all this year, that has to be addressed in some way. I'm sure that Brian Daboll is going to have a conversation with him. They're paying him so much money, and for that to be his end of season stat line is ludicrous in my opinion. And I think Kenny Golladay is a great wide receiver. I don't know what was going on, if it was injuries, if it's just a poor scheme fit. He's a big-bodied guy. The fact that, even if he didn't have a ton of yards and a ton of catches this year for whatever reason, in the end zone, he should be the go-to target. He's a big dude. He's a go up and get the football kind of guy. That's like what him and Stafford did when they were together. That situation needs to be addressed. I don't know how they're going to go about doing it, but I just cannot believe that Goliday is on the books for what he is on money-wise, and that was his first year in New York. In my opinion, beyond unacceptable, considering he was like their big-ticket guy and was supposed to help push Daniel Jones over the hump in the kind of slump that he's been dealing with so far in this early portion of his career. O-line obviously needs to see some reworking as well. 4 guys are set to hit free agency on that starting group: Will Hernandez, Billy Price, Nate Solder, and Matt Skura. So there's going to be a lot of shifting with the offensive line going on as well. A little bit of a hurdle that the Giants are going to have, obviously, with bringing people in and trying to readjust and maybe work around this offensive line issue that they've been dealing with for the last few years, is their projected cap number of about 10.7 over. So they're going to have to let go of some people, move some people around. I think they're going to have to really rely on their rookie draft class this year to produce and to really be a part of this team as they move forward in this new regime. But they definitely need to work on the O-line. Very curious to see what they do about Daniel Jones and with Saquon Barkley. And hopefully this next season, they are able to get more than just almost 40 catches and 500 yards out of Kenny Goliday, because that is just an absolute terrible result for what was supposed to be, again, something that helped push the offense to the next level type of signing. Coming in at number 3, and this will probably surprise a lot of people, but I will explain in detail, so don't just yell at me before you listen to what I have to say. I have the Eagles sitting at 9-8, playoff team, and you're probably wondering, how the heck are they not number 2? Well, I have a few questions about Philadelphia, and the questions that I raise, they concern me a little bit more than the teams that are in front of them. Their passing game, questionable. I'm not sold on their passing game just yet. And it's not just Jalen Hurts. I think it's a combination of a little bit of everything. I think that they kind of got too much into like the gimmicky running style. If you are a run-first team, you need to have a damn good defense to make sure that the teams you're playing against are not putting up numbers on you where you're falling behind at a score of like 34-17 trying to make a comeback when your strength is running the football. So I think it's a unique style to play, and it's viable, but not as viable as like what the rest of the league is doing. And again, you need to have that great defense to back up like a run-first type style of offense. I think they need to add to the receiving core. Jalen Reagor was a whiff, that's not on. I don't know who that's on, but Jalen Reagor has not turned into the guy that I think the Eagles were expecting him to be. They obviously have Devontae Smith. He has looked really good for them. And then, of course, you have Dallas Goddard as well, the tight end. He was one of the best tight ends in the league here. And it was funny because when he got his contract extension during the season, some people were like, they paid him way too much money. But he was like statistically one of the best tight ends in the league this year. The guy is awesome for this team and was an excellent pick for them. I think they need to just build around Jalen Hurts a little bit more, and they need to dial back the running a little bit. I think they need to bring in some more weapons for Hurts and get Hurts more comfortable throwing the football and less on relying on that unique running game that they had going on here. It was fun to watch, and it was effective at times, but when it came to going up against like the really good teams and the playoff teams, we saw it when they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a couple of times this year, and that second time, especially in the playoffs, they don't have the defense that is able to shut down an opposing team to allow them to just run the ball all over people the way they were trying to. You need a really good defense to back that up. On top of that, they're going to be losing potential players. We have first-round pick Derek Barnett. He's a free agent. Whether they decide to keep him or not, I don't know, but that's a guy that's going up there. Anthony Harris, they just recently brought in from the Vikings. He's going to be on that free agent market as well. They have some really good linebackers and everything there, but losing some pieces on the D-line and the secondary, definitely not going to help their situation. On the offensive side of the football, they have a 400-500 monster of a running group there between Jalen Hurts and their running backs there. Boston Scott and Jordan Howard are potential free agents here if they do not opt to bring them back in for another season or two, however long they decide to offer them on a deal. But Boston Scott, in my opinion, is a guy they should bring back. I think he came on really strong in the second half of the season. Jordan Howard as well. Both of them were, I think everyone in that running committee there was, an important piece in one way or another for the success of this offense. But it'll be curious to see if they continue on to go with like their 4 running backs and then also the Jalen Hurts factor of rushing the football as well. So there's going to be some people that they're going to have to look at and see if they decide to keep or not. The good thing is they do have a lot of money to play with. They're $21.5 million under the cap, so they have a lot of money to move around and be able to play with and, make an addition here or there. But I think in this offseason, they need to focus on really building out that offense and focus a little bit more on passing the ball. I like Nick Sirianni. I still kind of doubt him as the head coach of the Eagles. They did a great job slipping into the playoffs as the number 7 seed, but they're going to need a lot more from this team and a lot more from Nick Sirianni and this passing game before I really take the Eagles super, super seriously. Next up, at number 2, coming in at 7-10 to end the season, we have the Washington Commanders. This is a team that I think has a lot more going for them if they can just kind of pull it all together than I think the Eagles do, because this is a team that, in my opinion, is a quarterback upgrade away from being like a 10-7 to 11-6 type of team. And I think that they could even flip the losses they had against the Eagles this year because they lost both games against the Eagles, and they would end up being like the 9-8 or potential 10-7 team, whereas the Eagles would take the other side. I like Heineke. So don't get me wrong on this. I love the story about him, and he's had some really good games, and he played his absolute heart out in that wild card game against the Buccaneers last year. However, when you look at just their wins and their losses, they had 4 really crushing losses that were like a 7-point game or less. And on top of that, they have some wins that were just so tight and such a grind to get out, and there was not a ton of like stellar quarterback play coming out of Heineke. This is a team that, like I said, I think is a quarterback upgrade away from being a much better unit and approaching double-digit wins at the end of a season. On top of that, I don't know what happened to the defense this year, but they did like a complete 180 and just like went the other way. And I have a hard time believing that that's all on the defense. The offense wasn't super effective at moving the football, and one thing that I am such a I talk about this a lot with people is when the offense fails to move the ball effectively, the defense suffers from that. But also, I don't know if it's because they brought in guys to upgrade their secondary. They had the great, the defensive line with all the first-round picks that everyone was always talking about. This was a unit that was set up for success this offseason, but they went from 47 sacks in 2020 to only 38 this year, and then 21 passing touchdowns allowed last year to 43. That number doubled, and they added additions to their secondary this offseason to improve it. They need to take a hard look at themselves and kind of figure out what went on there, and that's more so on the coaching staff than anything else, because it's bizarre to me that you have such a similar group on that defensive side of the football in those key positions, and you upgraded the units, and you took such a massive step back. So whether you're putting players in the wrong positions to succeed or to fail, whatever it may be, they need to look at themselves and kind of figure out how they can put players in the right positions to be as successful as possible, because I don't understand how that flip went the way it did. The Washington defense last year was so dominant. How do you step back like that? And especially, I mean, look at what they did to the Bucs in the playoffs, and then they beat the Bucs this year. Like, they know how to get it done. There was a few games this year where they flashed and looked like that defense from the year prior. They got to figure that out there. They have $31.8 million to play with, being under the cap. So whatever it is that they think they got to do, I think that they're poised to make a really strong push next year, upgrade the quarterback position with, one of the free agents that are potentially going to be moving around, or make a trade. There's a quarterback free agent / trade market this offseason should be an interesting one to follow. And there's going to be some bigger names available that I think would be an upgrade over Heineke. This is a team that I think will take a good step forward going through the offseason and into next year. I like them at the number 2 spot. And then lastly, of course, the final team of the division, the Dallas Cowboys, the division winners of this season. Great unit, the most talented roster in the NFC East, in my opinion, and I don't think a lot of people would argue about that. They have so many guys on both the offensive and defensive side of the football. My biggest concern for them going into this year, and it kind of showed up a bit here and there towards the end of the season and, of course, in the playoffs as well, was the inexperience and just how the youthfulness of the defense. It's a very young group with a lack of experience in the pros, and I think that kind of is what burned the Cowboys in the end. They're a great team, and they have so much great young talent, and I think in due time, this defense is going to be a problem because they can only get better, right? They can't regress after such a strong first year with a lot of young guys playing in a lot of key positions here. Micah Parsons is going to be a dude on that defense for a long time. But between that and then the questionable decision-making that you get from Mike McCarthy in late-game situations were probably the two biggest things that hurt this team. And for that to be your issues, that's not bad. Ezekiel Elliott might be making a little too much money. I think they could use some of the money that they're paying him and bring those resources to elsewhere onto the team. But you have a great offensive group. The offensive line is definitely not quite what it used to be when Zeke first got there, and I think that's where the regression has kind of come a little bit, because when he came into the league, the Cowboys had the best offensive line in the NFL, and that wasn't a conversation. That was a fact. But I do have a couple questions about them. They're going to be potentially losing some guys. They have a few that are popping up on the free agent list here. Randy Gregory's a guy. Leighton Vander Esch is a guy. Dalton Schultz is a guy. All three of those players, contributors to this team on both sides of the football. I really hope they bring Dalton Schultz back, because I think he ended up being a really solid security blanket in the middle there for not Amari Cooper. His name's on my notes over here. Dak Prescott, excuse me. But they're certainly going to be losing some guys. There is concern with that because they're about 21.6 over the cap going into this offseason. Obviously, with the cap number going up and everything, this is alleviating some of the team's problems, but there are still a handful of teams that'll be over. So they're going to have to move some money around. They're going to have to probably bite the bullet on a guy or two and lose them. And I'm only mentioning a few people here. These are just key people that played 70 to 80% of the snaps or whatever. But in my opinion, they are the definitive number 1 team in the NFC East right now. They pretty much ran away with the division. They completely blew out the Eagles, who also made the playoffs. It wasn't even close. They had a pretty tight game towards the end of the season there against the Commanders. So other than, potentially losing a few guys, they're poised to do really well. I expect them to be the number 1 team in the NFC East again going into next year. We'll obviously see what kind of moves the other teams make in the division. And then also, I'm very curious to see what they do with Amari Cooper, because recently the rumor mill has been swirling and Amari Cooper's name has been coming up in potential trade talk. I don't think that's the way they should go. I like Amari Cooper in Dallas, and, maybe he wasn't as productive as you wanted him to be at the end of the season and in that playoff game against the 49ers, but I think the pairing of Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb is a lot better and more threatening than the pairing of CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. So we'll have to see what they end up doing with that. I hope they keep Amari Cooper there, because I think that's what ultimately leads to the most success for them offensively. But that is pretty much everything I got for my NFC East Power Rankings. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Who do you think's the best in the division? Who's in the worst? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Defend your team in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I appreciate y'all for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Have a good start to your weekend, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.